There's a lot of things in this old world that just do not make sense. Like why there's so few believers on the firing line, while so many others sit the fence. But if you want to know where the Word of God stands, and believe it wants to use your feet and hands, it's time to take your faith out of the seats and into the streets, and come along with me. If you only look, then you will see on WCN-TV.
Hey, this is the day the Lord has made, and it's a gorgeous one in Augusta, Maine. Just got outside and took a kind of prayer walk. I like to do that whenever I can, especially on a sunny, beautiful central Maine day like today, and did some praying. And glad to be on the show, Wisconsin Christian News Television Live. The best place to find us on the web is WCN-TV.net, WCN-TV.net. We're live every Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m. Central Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is where I'm broadcasting from in Maine. And today we're going to be talking with a really special guest, someone I've known for many years, and he's a fellow New Englander. We're going to educate all you Westerners from where it all got started up here in New England, the home of all those colleges we'd rather forget these days, Harvard and Yale and all of that stuff. Can you believe what is coming out of these institutions of so-called higher learning? Well, I think we got to rename that saying to institutions of lower learning. Oh my goodness, what a disaster the intellectual class has made of Western civilization. I'm going to give you a quick illustration in a minute of what I'm talking about as a setup to kind of tee up our conversation, start our conversation with our guest today from Camp Constitution. Spent many years working with the great John Birch Society. We'll talk a little bit about that. And now heads up something called Camp Constitution. I'll tell you his name in a moment. But before we go there, Spencer, throw up Rob Pugh's website for the newspaper. I always like to start the show by encouraging our viewers and listeners to check out Rob's archive. Great opportunity for you to work on your sanctification, to increase your knowledge base. Very important in this World War III that you gain a precise understanding of the threat. And the threat that the entire globe faces now is really more spiritual than it is anything else. It seems like it's political, but if you stop for a minute and think about it, or if you do a little bit of research, if you dig beneath CNN and MSNBC, you quickly start asking yourself, even if you're not a religious person, what in the world is going on here? And as you start to ask those questions, it's not uncommon for people all over the world to start to think about questions of the soul and questions of the spirit and religious questions, because this World War III represents the most profound threat to our soul and to humanity that we've ever seen in history. We've already been through two major world wars in the past century. A little more than a century. Well, no, not about a century. And now we've started the Third World War. The stakes in this war are much higher than the stakes were in the first two world wars, because what's literally at stake now at the hands of this global communist offensive is our are the soul of humanity. I mean, we're talking about profound questions like whether or not we're going to be able to own property. And I'm not just talking about the nation of America. I'm talking about the whole world. We're being asked to answer the question of whether or not private property should be a thing in the entire globe going forward. I mean, this is amazing, folks. And we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about that in light of one of the most profound and important and influential written documents that humanity has ever produced. And it's worked really, really well for 330 million of us on planet Earth for in our memory. And of course, that's the United States Constitution combined with all of our state constitution. We're going to learn a little bit more about all of that matrix today with Hal Shurtleff, who's the leader of Camp Constitution. Be encouraging to check out his website. I'm sure Spencer has showed you the Rob Pugh's websites while I've been talking about that, so you've gotten a chance to see. Go check out his archive at Wisconsin Christian News newspaper, which all of his archive is on the web. And then also check out WCN-TV.net. Pass that along to your friends, family, people who have an open mind, who aren't full of all of this nonsense. Can you believe it? We're gonna talk a little bit about that nonsense right now. We're gonna watch a 1-minute commercial produced by Representative Lauren Boebert, and it's entitled "Madam Speaker, Tear Down This Wall."
I'm Lauren Boebert, a mom, a small business owner, a defender of freedom. Here's what I know. You protect what you love. President Trump built a big, beautiful wall because he loves America, and he wanted to secure our country and protect us from drugs, illegal aliens pouring into our communities, and sex traffickers. Democrats, they fought him every step of the way. And now, welcome to Fort Pelosi, where Democrats decry walls from within their own heavily guarded razor wire wall. Democrats don't want to protect you because they don't care about you, but they'll spare no expense protecting themselves.
We will not build a wall.
No, there will not be another foot of wall constructed in my administration.
I'm not for a wall. I'm not for a wall.
It's time to cut the crap and remember, this is the people's house. Madam Speaker, tear down this wall.
So, Hal Shurtleff, come on in here, and it's just bewildering to me what has happened to our nation's capital. I've enjoyed so many trips there with family down through the decades, and to think that the great People's House, the Capitol building, which has been the home for doing politics in light of the great United States Constitution for over 200 years, that it's surrounded by this razor-wired fence. I mean, Hal, does this have anything to do with our constitutional liberties or with constitutional government? What in the world is going on?
No, it's not. In fact, it's a really an outrageous thing. I remember hearing this slogan, fear the government. We'd rather have the government fear us than we fear the government. But it looks like the government now fears the people, at least Nancy Pelosi and the leftist Democrats who control Congress by thankfully not a big margin. And they're putting up, it is ironic how they put a fence around the Capitol and to keep people away. Meanwhile, the borders have been wide open, things since Biden signed his executive order telling ICE not to deport people. And so while most people are walking around wearing these stupid masks based upon bad science and unconstitutional mandates to prevent us from getting this COVID-19, I call it COVID-19 84, the illegal aliens, many of them are coming in here illegally, of course, with COVID, and they were being bussed all over the country. So on one hand, the government is telling us they want to stop the spread. On the other hand, they are promoting the spread. So Frederick Bastiat, the great French statesman who wrote a book called The Law back in 1850, I call it the answer to the Communist Manifesto. He had an essay where the poison and the antidote is created in the same laboratory, and that laboratory is government. And things don't change much, as King Solomon said. Nothing new under the sun. People who love power tend to increase their power, and that's what we see here.
So, Hal, I've taken to, as I campaign for governor here in Maine, using the term global communism. Am I exaggerating the threat when I use that phrase?
Actually, I think all of us who have been talking about this new world order, one world government, globalism, now the deep state, we've been totally vindicated. You know, back in the 80s when you were reading, there was a great book, Why None Dare Call It Conspiracy. It was published in 1972 by the late Gary Allen. And you can actually find a PDF version of that on our website. You know, people are saying, "Oh, you're one of those conspiracy theorists," but now it's no longer a theory. They're pretty much open about their intentions. You know, they want to have this some type of. They don't use the word world government. They use global governance. They use terms like sustainable development, Agenda 2030. But all of these terms all mean, of course, the consolidation of power. So it's kind of much easier to again, we don't have to be ashamed of what we believe. It's obvious. It's in the headlines every day now.
But the one thing, Hal, that hasn't changed is the willingness of the lamestream media, the legacy media, to double down on calling us conspiracy theorists if we dare to quote the World Economic Forum.
Exactly.
And you've been doing this for decades. In your work with the John Birch Society and now with Camp Constitution, you've been quoting these documents and talking about this direction that sorry about that. Somebody trying to make a phone call into my $1 million studio here in my basement. So you've known about that. None of this is a surprise to you. You've been talking about it, but the lamestream media the whole time hasn't changed. If anything, they've gotten worse. But what's changed is the fact that people are connecting like they've never been able to before using this technology. And it feels to me like the lamestream, the main, what Donald Trump calls the fake news.
Fake news.
You know, they're doubling down and quadrupling down on the same narrative, the same thing that they've done our whole career working in this field. But it feels like it's losing its potency. And my theory is that that's because of sharp and effective use of this technology. And that also helps explain this amazingly bold censorship that the campaign that big tech started back in 2016 when they realized Donald Trump was going to become the president of the United States. They threw off Alex Jones and then they haven't stopped since. They're throwing everybody off.
Well, our YouTube channel was demonetized about 1.5 years ago. And I think they're doing what they call shadow ban, because we've had some videos. For example, Professor Willie Soon is one of the world's top climate realists, and he's one of our instructors, and we've got a lot of his videos, and we were getting hundreds of thousands of views. If you put in Willie Soon's name, automatically our videos would show. Now you don't find them. So they're doing some of that, but we can still circumvent that and still get the word out. And I want to give a shout out to this wonderful newspaper, Wisconsin Christian News. I first found out about it from my good friend Bob Roy up in Presque Isle, Maine, some years ago, and I enjoy reading it. And I got a chance to work with Coach Dave Daubermeyer last January, and I hope to do some work with him in April in the Boston area. So,
yeah. So Camp Constitution is something that you lead every year, right? Tell us about Camp Constitution.
Right. Well, we actually started off doing a week-long family camp back in 2009 because of there was a national program that I was involved with, and it had canceled its week-long camp. They had like 8 or 9 camps. So we kept our Northeast camp, and we just called it Camp Constitution and incorporated. Actually, in the early days, it was an unincorporated association. And then as time went on, we had some materials that we use in our classes that were out of print. So I had a friend of mine said, well, look, I'll pay to have them put in print. So that was Camp Constitution Press. We published 5 or 6 books, and we reprinted some great things. For example, this Color Communism and Common Sense that was originally published by a former communist back in the late 50s, exposing how the communists use the race issue to promote communism. And it's still very, we put it back in print about 4 or 5 years ago. And Reverend Stevie Kraft, our camp chaplain, wrote the foreword to it, and it's been getting a lot of interest since May of last year, as you can imagine, as what we're seeing is what the communists wanted way back in the 30s. And we're seeing it, they don't use the term communism. Now they get a group like Black Lives Matter working, but it's still very, so then in 2017, I became the full-time director of Camp Constitution, way before it was a voluntary position. So I travel around the region promoting the U.S. Constitution, promoting our not just our week-long camp, but our other activities. We have something called the Sam Blumenfeld Archive. If you could look at our website, you'll see that little little link there. Sam, I think you knew Sam personally, but for those who may not know who he is, he was one of the pioneers in the modern homeschool movement. He was a dear friend of mine, and when he passed away, he willed us his library and papers. And it was quite a feat because we had 200 boxes of books and a lot of papers going back to the 40s and 50s and 60s. Great material, and we were able to PDF and a lot of the audios we got. We even had reel-to-reels. We were able to put that in MP3 and MP4 formats on this Samuel Blumenfeld archive. And last year we got over 2 million views by people all over the world, mainly in the United States. It's a great resource for homeschoolers, historians, and teachers, educators. And so that's one of the things we're very excited about. We have a YouTube channel, as I mentioned earlier, a Facebook page, a publishing arm. And we actually have a learning center in Lexington, Massachusetts, just a short distance from the Lexington Battle Green. And we host events there on a regular basis. So we keep busy.
So these are interesting days for education. Your website is an illustration with the Samuel Blumenfeld website. Give that again so that Spencer can put that up while we're talking.
If you look at the home page, you'll see on the bar, you'll see these. I think we'll just say Blumenfeld Archives, or you can just go Blumenfeld Archives. Yeah, there we go. And all we need is an email address and a username. Of course, you can give us more than that. That's fine too. And you'll be able to get into that and have access to, I think we have about 10 of his books that we put in PDF. And the most important work he did was the most simplest. It was called Alpha Phonics. It was 128 lessons, how to teach people how to read. I used it when my wife and I, we were homeschool parents, and that's available as a free download. It's available in a online version with all 128 lessons in audio or video, or, both. You can use both. We also have instructions on how to use cursive. That's sort of a lost art today, unfortunately, and basic arithmetic. And then Sam, he traveled around the country and even other parts of the world discussing these issues. What happened? Why are we in the mess we're in? And he goes back to this. I hate to use the word progressive because there's nothing progressive about socialism, but he actually goes back to as far as Horace Mann back in the 1830s and 40s and the influence he had. He went to Prussia and he said, basically, I've seen the future and this is what it is: state control of education. And then guys like John Dewey, the next generation of socialists who thought being literate was not necessary, and how they used the pulpit. How the classroom will be used by the secular humanist as the pulpit is used by pastors and Christian in the Christian community. And they did an incredible job. And the result we see in the government schools today is the result that they want, or else they would have changed it. They want poor reading skills. They're promoting socialism. They're promoting abortion. And now they're aggressively promoting this transgender madness. And it's not just in the inner city schools, it's in practically every school in the country.
Hal, to speak to that issue real quick, our governor up here in Maine, Jezebel Janet Mills, who is killing everything.
Yes.
literally, is forcing through her Department of Education right now as we speak a rule. It's not going to have a public hearing. It's not the subject of debate by your elected representatives. It's being pushed as a rule through the Department of Education, through the school boards. And what we're hearing is that most of the school boards are just passing it without debate. They're just, like many rules get passed into to where they can be enforced within the school. They're without comment. They're just being pushed in without anybody knowing what's going on. But bottom line of what this rule does is it empowers guidance counselors to develop confidential, behind the back of parents relationships with 4-year-olds for the purpose of opening their minds to the question of whether or not they're a male or a female, a boy or a girl. So that it's to illustrate your point about where this evil has descended to, the depths to which it has descended.
Well, back in 1989, when I first met Sam Blumenfeld, at that time I was a father of just one child. And at the time, I think she was only 3 or 4. He said, never let your child set foot in a public school or government school. I took his advice. In fact, the only time my children did set feet in a school was to attend a church service, and some churches rent out school buildings, or when my daughters have their dance recitals at a high school. That's the only time, but never to be indoctrinated in the classrooms. And I think more and more Christians have come to realize that that's true. And in '89, it may have been a little more challenging to homeschool. Today, while it's somewhat challenging, the technology they have that's out there is enormous.
Well, and with COVID, Hal, I mean, it's like everybody's.
That's right. They call it, what do they call it? Remote learning. It's called homeschooling, right? But they won't even say homeschool because it has a different connotation than so-called remote learning. And a lot of parents have now seen firsthand what is going on in these government schools. So the homeschool movement is flourishing, even though they haven't had any conventions in a couple of years. And of course, you and I have attended conventions in Maine and Massachusetts, and I think Pennsylvania and other homeschool venues. But that doesn't mean the homeschool movement is dormant. In fact, that's the opposite is true. And I think I heard a statistic, if it was 50% more people are homeschooling or some, it was very encouraging. But I think it's about, you have to get your child. If you're watching this and your children are in government schools and they turn out to lose their faith, it's because of what you did. It's your fault. King Solomon said that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You're not going to get that in a government school. They're going to turn you into they're going to promote socialism, atheism, evolution, and homosexuality and transgenderism. That is what they're promoting. So if your child loses his or her faith, you played a key role in that by putting them in that government school. There's plenty of alternatives. You know, how many churches out there, Bible-believing churches all over the country, that are closed except for maybe Wednesday night and Sunday morning? Well, let's open up these churches to schools. You don't have to spend $1 million, $2 million putting a new building up. You already have one, and you don't need lots of classrooms. You have a lot of online organizations, freedom.
In the cloud. Hey, you're
That's
listening.
correct.
You're watching WCN-TV live stream, and we do have a couple guests that have made their way into the program. If you're watching on Facebook, or well, I don't know where we're streaming, but if you're watching, you can come in and be a live guest on the show, and we encourage that. You go to WCN-TV.net, WCN-TV.net, and I'm going to pause for a minute and see if anybody has a question or comment they would like to make. You can ask Hal a question. This is your chance, or make a point. So go right ahead. We've only got a couple guests this week. We're hoping to see that grow as time goes on, as we continue to produce the show. But we're talking with Hal Shurtleff from Camp Constitution. Hal, I want to thank you for coming on the show on such short notice. I had another
glad
guest
to be on.
cancel, and you're unafraid of taking a stand for the truth in public. I know recently we're coming up to a break in 4 minutes, but give us the latest status on that controversy that erupted in Boston over a flag. Wasn't it a flag issue?
Yes. Well, we attempted to get a permit to raise the Christian flag on a public access flagpole in front of City Hall Plaza. That was in September of 2017. We actually have filed a lawsuit against the city. And thanks to Liberty Counsel, who took the case pro bono, that is on its way to the Supreme Court as we speak. And hopefully the Supreme Court will pick up the case and will rule in our favor. We just lost the case at the lower level, which we expected when you have Obama-appointed judges. We didn't expect any justice in the First Circuit Court of Appeals, but there's a good chance that we would win our case. And that's why Liberty Counsel took the case to begin with, because they thought it was winnable, that it would set a precedent. And so that's what we have. So the same city that told us that it's a violation of the First Amendment. It's interesting how the left likes to be constitutionalist. I like to, when it comes to something like this, but when it comes to enforcing open borders, they're all sanctuary cities. They're all in favor of flaunting the laws made in pursuance of the Constitution. But it was ironic too. The city of Boston's seal and its flag contains a Bible verse from the Old Testament, from Kings, First Kings, I think. And then they said they changed this. They switched it over to approved government speech. So that flag, and it's just a Christian flag, is just a very very simple looking flag. There's a red cross on the left, in the chevron, I think it's called. That's it. There isn't any Bible verse on there. But the fact is, we call it the Christian flag. They say that it's not approved government speech, but approved government speech includes flying the flag of Communist China, flying the flag of Communist Cuba, flying the homosexual rainbow flag, and flying the transgender flag, just to mention a few. It's interesting, too, that they violate state law every time they fly a flag of a foreign country without a foreign dignitary being in there in official capacity. So they can flaunt that law. But we think we're going to prevail. And we have demonstrated already just how hostile the city of Boston is to Christianity. And it's interesting, our program would have been consisted of a local historian talking about Boston's rich Christian history, the city set upon a hill, that famous sermon on the Arbella by the founder of Governor Winthrop, all the way to Pope John Paul II's visit. There's actually a monument right on Boston Common commemorating that visit, and I think it was 1979. I was overseas in the Army at the time, so I didn't get a chance. A couple of million people were there. It's just Boston has a great, rich history. And we're also going to have a presentation of why Christians need to be involved with racial reconciliation. We know that the enemy wants a race war, and Christians have to stand up and expose this kind of thing. That's why we need to expose groups like Black Lives Matter, and promote Christian groups like Every Black Life Matters. So,
and we're gonna that's what we're gonna start talking about when we come back from our break here at the bottom of the hour. Be thinking about any questions or points you might want to make if you're a member of our live studio audience. If you're not in the live studio audience yet, then why not join us? Go to WCN-TV.net and click on that big red button, and it's real easy to come on in. So stay with us through the break, and go ahead, Spencer.
Start.
Pornography is a destructive force. It destroys individuals, families, and fuels the out-of-control demand for sex trafficking. 45% of Christian families say porn is a problem in their home, but why aren't churches and public schools talking about this? Fear. People who view porn think they're the only one. It's a lie. Statistically, more people view porn than who do not and struggle in silence. www.lynnfrederick.com. You can find the book I wrote about my own battle with porn and the presentations that I do for churches and public schools. lynnfrederick.com.
Start.
Pornography is a destructive force. It destroys individuals, families, and fuels the out-of-control demand for sex trafficking. 45% of Christian families say porn is a problem in their home, but why aren't churches and public schools talking about this? Fear. People who view porn think they're the only one. It's a lie. Statistically, more people view porn than who do not and struggle in silence. www.lynnfrederick.com. You can find the book I wrote about my own battle with porn and the presentations that I do for churches and public schools. lynnfrederick.com.
All right, we're talking with Hal Shurtleff from Camp Constitution, and someone who is featured as a member of their Speakers Bureau on their website is Reverend Stephen L. Kraft, and he's a black man who is a Harvard graduate and recently put out an email to Hal's email list, which I read, and it seems that Dr. Kraft, Reverend Kraft, recently moved into Lexington, Massachusetts, and his white liberal neighbors really like him and give him kind of a kids glove treatment because he's black. And Hal, in that email, he sort of pokes him. I thought he did a really good job. You guys did a really good job crafting that email. You kind of poke him for
right.
for being so nice to Reverend Kraft.
This is something that no, I used to live in Boston. I've lived there all my life. I'm now living in beautiful Alton, New Hampshire, on Lake Winnipesaukee with my family. In the more affluent communities, Milton, for example, which abuts Boston, Brookline, which abuts Boston, you'll see, not everywhere, but you'll see plenty of Black Lives Matter signs, or these stupid little signs that say, in this house we believe, love is love, water is life, feminism is for everybody, Black Lives Matter, all this, totally illogical, nonsensical virtue signaling. Well, you see that in Lexington too. Lexington has a black population of about 1.5%, and I was teasing Rev and his wife. I said that's 1.7% since you and your wife moved in, and they actually moved in to be the caretakers of our learning center in Lexington, and Rev and Edith are very personable people, and he's got to know the police pretty well there, and some of the neighbors. I think some of the neighbors find out what he stands for. They sort of, they're not hostile. They just sort of ignore. But that letter, that email was used as a letter to the editor to be sent to the local weekly newspapers in Lexington, basically saying, for all of you well-intentioned liberals, and I would have to assume that they're not all evil, want to see the world come to an end, anti-Americans. They're probably just kind of brainwashed. They went to elite universities. They make good money.
Watch too much CNN, Hal.
They watch Don Lemon on CNN, and they kind of believe this stuff. In fact, Edith, Mrs. Kraft, had a MAGA hat on. No, I'm sorry, she didn't. She was downtown talking to this nice old white lady, and they were getting along fine. And then she mentioned that she's voting for Donald Trump, and the woman just about had a heart attack. How a black person isn't supposed to vote for Donald Trump? Don't you know? We know what's best for you. It's condescending racism. So I don't think the letter's been published yet, but I thought I decided it should be used around the country. And the organization that we were promoting in this is a group called Every Black Life Matters. Because Black Lives Matter, the organization that came up with that very clever little 3-word slogan, they're not interested in unborn black babies that are being aborted at an alarming rate. In New York City, for example, there are more abortions than there are births of blacks. They don't really care about the black policemen or the black businessmen that have their businesses burned to the ground, or women, for example. They seem to care a lot about gangbangers and thugs who have criminal backgrounds, get in trouble with police, and some of them die. Some of them maybe George Floyd, for example. Here was a guy. He was in the cruiser under arrest. He got out. He said, "I can't breathe," long before the policeman actually even touched him. He was behind the wheel of his car, and this man had a police record a mile long. He spent time in jail. He was involved in a home invasion where he put either a knife or a gun to the stomach of a pregnant Hispanic or black woman. But somehow CNN doesn't tell you about that. They might want to make you think that he was some kind of Sunday school teacher that was just innocently walking down the street, and white policemen, as all white policemen do, just decided to pounce on him and murder him. That's the narrative, that all policemen are murderers. We need to defund the police. Well, that view is not shared by the predominantly number of blacks at all. In fact, just the opposite is true. And as I was saying earlier, you go through the affluent communities, liberal affluent communities, you'll see these signs. You go to the black community, I only saw one Black Lives Matter sign in Dorchester and Roxbury in my travels there, in mainly black communities. So why is it that these white leftists who live in these unsustainable homes, 5,000, 6,000 square feet with 3 or 4 cars, nice cars in the garage, if not more, why are they so concerned about this? You see, if they're really that concerned about the situation and this so-called white privilege, why don't they give their homes to Black Lives Matter and move into the some little shack or some little substandard housing? They don't seem to do that.
It's disgusting what we've allowed to happen to our country. When I say we, I mean I think that New England has to take a lion's share of the responsibility for this craziness, and I'm so glad that you guys are calling them out on it, because this is where America's jurisprudence, American philosophy got its start, and it's they're pointing. They are leading the way into this global communist future that the World Economic Forum is promoting. The intellectual heavyweights behind that support CNN's narrative come to, not exclusively, of course, but there's no lack of support from the Harvards and the Yales and their graduates, and the narratives
in the Dartmouths. That's right.
The Dartmouths that come out of these institutions. And it's very sad how, when you think about the profound truths that are contained in the document that you dedicate your camp to, namely the United States Constitution. I was encouraged to hear you say that Liberty Counsel has the case and that they are optimistic about winning, because that makes me think that even though we watch this, we watch the judiciary turn its back on the appeal Donald Trump made, and so many of us were supporting, to review the election results from November 3rd, we do still have a constitution. Our judicial system, our entire political system is in trouble. It's a mess, judiciary, executive, and legislative. But we still have it. It is in place. It's there, right? And you teach about it, and you're using it.
That's right. The Constitution, it's there. It's been ignored. And I know there are some people that love to see it change dramatically to do away with, for example, the Electoral College. The founders were so brilliant there was lots of debate. It took from May to September to come up with this very simple, only couple of thousand words, right? This great document to govern. And it was based on a Christian worldview. And somebody said to me recently, well, I don't see any Bible verses in there. I said, read the Constitution and ask yourself, what type of worldview could that be the product of? It couldn't be the worldview of an atheist, a socialist, a Muslim. It had to be someone with a Judeo-Christian or Christian worldview, because it presupposes man is pretty wicked. And it said that, because of that, you had these checks and balances, incredible checks and balances. And it was made very difficult to amend. And the Electoral College was a safeguard against the concept of majority rule, democracy. The founders wanted nothing to do with democracy. You read some of their comments. James Madison in Federalist Number 10 said democracies have been spectacles of turbulence and contention, shortening their lives and brightening their deaths. They did have the Congress, the House of Representatives, is the people's branch. It is based on population, of course. That was a good thing. The Senate used to be appointed by the elected officials, the state reps and state senators in the states. So at one point, the senators were basically ambassadors from the states to the federal government. and that changed with the 17th Amendment, which is regrettable that that was passed. And the president is chosen not by the popular vote, by the electoral voters. So, the state of California, with I don't know how many millions of votes, 54 electoral votes, um, and some of the smaller states as well, they still have a say because if it was based on the popular vote, this country would be run by New York City, Chicago, some of the other Los Angeles, the cities with big populations. We would have lost our constitution a long time ago. So we need to. That's a great safeguard. The electoral college is something that we should never do away with. But what's encouraging is that there's a big growing freedom movement, and we see evidence of it all. And when the Democrats did not, I believe that the election there was some states with definitely irregularities, and I think it would have been enough that Donald Trump should be sitting in the White House. Now, Donald Trump himself is not maybe a staunch constitutionalist as we would like him to be, but he was a far cry than anything I've seen in my lifetime. And I don't remember Eisenhower, but I do remember Kennedy. I remember that when I was a little guy, about 3 or 4. But every president, and that includes Ronald Reagan, has always promoted big government. Now, big government might have grown smaller, or not as fast, I should say, under a Reagan. But you look at presidents like both Bushes, George H.W. Bush. You can go on to YouTube and put in New World Order George Bush, and you will see him giving a speech in front of a joint session of Congress calling for a new world order. Then he defined it, a UN as envisioned by its founders. Well, I knew who its founders were, and I would think that he was a CIA agent. He's a Yale grad. He's a lot smarter than a lot of people. He could fly a plane. Pretty smart guy.
Being primarily a political ploy that is now entering into, potentially, it seems to me, a period of intense blowback from populist movements all over the world and from freedom-loving Americans, Trump supporters, basically. I mean, Patrick Byrne, in his new book, The Big Rig, indicates, based on his research, and his research is very, very detailed. He was working with some of the brightest minds who were focusing on this election on November 3rd, and he started working with them in the summer of 2020, and he's still working with them today. And he details the work that he did with them and the findings that they made regarding the Dominion machines, regarding the irregularities that you mentioned in some of the states. And he argues that Trump got 80 million votes and Biden got 69 million votes. So you've got the rise of populism in countries all over the world, especially concentrated in Europe, and the populism
South America too.
South America appears to be rising in America, of course. The Trump movement would have to be could be fairly described as populism. And it appears that there's a little bit of a backtracking beginning to emerge at the World Economic Forum, and some of their videos, they're taking them off Twitter, they're editing them, they're beginning to pivot. I don't know if you've noticed this, but in the last week or two, CNN is beginning to pivot to try to blame QAnon for pushing the Great Reset. When the Great Reset comes from the World Economic Forum, it comes from the globalists. And
they're also trying to tell us that groups like the Proud Boys are the ones that really behind the riots, which is total nonsense.
Right. Everybody knows this. So my question is, do you think? I think Americans are, when it comes to politics, a profoundly patient people, and I think that's because of the Constitution, and it's because of this sort of embedded understanding that our government moves very slowly. It moves in years in terms of debating and resolving and coming to terms with things.
And that's a good thing too.
It's a good thing, yeah. And so I'm beginning. I've always known that my own opinion is this thing's been political from the beginning, the whole COVID thing. But I'm beginning to and I thought it would. I thought at the beginning that it was that they overplayed their hand with it. They went way too sciencey, and they went way too deep. They went way too deep with the authoritarian response. And I'm beginning to see evidence that I think they've done that. I think they did, and I'm kind of. What do you think? Do you think that we might be moving into a point, moving to a point where we're going to be able to take the masks off, get rid of the distancing, all that, the lockdowns, all that stuff? What do you think?
Well, when it first happened, there was a lot of unknowns. The average person, we're not experts on diseases, so it was sort of like the first couple of weeks, and then as these more, first they said that you had nothing to worry about. Anthony Fauci, the WHO, which by the way is really an arm of the Chinese Communist Party. Oh, this isn't that big a deal. And what the communists did in China is that they canceled all domestic flights, but not international flights. Something we found out, a few months later.
Yeah.
And I remember we were told, go to China. I remember Marty Walsh, mayor of Boston. Go down to Chinatown. Don't be a racist. Don't close off the flights because that's racism. To point out that, so if the virus is coming from a geographical area, which happens to be China, it's racist to mention that, which is totally insane. And I was involved with one of the first Open Up Massachusetts rallies. It was a convoy. We had a great time. Went through downtown Boston and all the neighborhoods, most of the neighborhoods of Boston. We went through Chinatown, and this would be May. The place was both locked up. All the restaurants were closed. Even some of them were padlocked. But just a few months ago, we were said that we were racist if we didn't go to Chinatown and order Chinese food. People like Pelosi and other big city mayor of New York, was one around, go around, eat, go to Chinatown. Nothing to worry about. Let's have a big celebration. And then all of a sudden, you got to wear a mask. First, Fauci said you don't need to wear a mask. The Surgeon General said you don't need to wear a mask. 2 months later, oh, you got to wear, now you got to wear 2 masks or 3 masks, you see. So I knew, and the minute they had the mask mandate, and I was living in Boston, there are not as many freedom-loving people as there are in other parts of the country. The people in Boston, let's say 80% of them love the mask. They're proud of it. They wear it. They'll wear it when they're driving. They probably wear it to sleep and wear it in the shower. Some of these people are very intelligent. They've got degrees, but they still are so afraid. And of course, in a way, you can't blame them. The media does a good job scaring. They call it panic porn. Oh, every day you hear how many new cases there were. In a case, there could be someone tested positive. And I've known people who've had it, and they didn't even know they had it. They didn't have any symptoms. They got tested positive, so they went home for about 3 or 4 days, and then they got retested. Okay, fine. Well, they become a case. You have a case of it. Here in Alton, I think there's one case in the town of Alton, 5,000 people, give or take, and in the whole county, there might be 30 or 40 cases, and most of these people are just, they have a slight temperature.
They've got the flu, right? They got the flu, right?
They got the flu. They may even had too much to drink the night before, and they say you've got COVID. And I'm not trying to downplay it. I did have a dear, one of my oldest friends. His mom died of it because she was in her 90s. She had pre-existing conditions. I think something like 80 to 90% of these people that are dying are over 80 years of age.
Yeah, Hal, I say that people die with it. They don't die from
That's
it.
right. They die with it. That's right.
They die with it. And and the statistics bear that out. I mean, the overall recovery rate over all ages is something like 95%. And that includes all the
I think it's even higher than that.
Yeah, and when you start going below 60 years of age or 65, maybe even 70 years of age, the number closes in on 100%, and you get down to kids, and they all survive. All the kids survive.
And what's nauseating is to see little children with these masks on, and a good engineer, a structural engineer, before there's a project, a building or a bridge, they do a good job of determining the impact of this particular structure or bridge that it will have on the environment, it will have in the local infrastructure. The social scientists didn't do a good job here because there was a lot of things they probably didn't foresee, like I think.
Yeah, Hal, it begs the question. It makes you wonder if it wasn't intentional. And I've come to conclude, based on upon my own reading and listening and research, that it is intentional. I mean,
No, I agree with that. And
they really don't. They really don't care. The Faucis of this world really don't care.
They don't care. Agenda 21 is something that I've discussed for years, exposing it's a UN plan to bring forth this Green New Deal, green community. And this lockdown was really very much a big part of Agenda 21 because people weren't driving. They weren't going to plays. They weren't going to movie theaters. They weren't going to baseball games. So the carbon footprint was greatly reduced because of it. And so I think the world masters and world planners love to see that. There were very few people flying on airplanes, taking vacations.
They're bragging about it now. They're bragging about it.
Yeah. They love it. They love the lockdown. And most of these people are pretty well-to-do to begin with. They don't care about businesses going. They don't own small restaurants.
Right. They're not locked down. They're jetting around the world, and they're jetting around.
Yeah. So I think I'm hoping that some positive things will come out of this. Like a lot of people have been awakened to what's happening.
Hal, the clock is running, and I want to make sure you get in a plug for the family camp.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Well, we have a wonderful week-long family camp. That was a begin. That's why we started to begin with. Just a week-long. It runs from July 18th to the 23rd at the Singing Hills Christian Camp. And that's in Plainfield, New Hampshire, just a little south of Lebanon. Beautiful location. And we have some great instructors. Alex Newman is one of our instructors.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Jonathan Alexander, an attorney of Liberty Counsel, is another. We have Pastor David Whitney of the Institute on the Constitution. He'll be there with his wife. And we have Professor Willie Soon, who is one of the top atmospheric scientists in the world. He comes there with his whole family. And we also have ladies' retreats. We have one coming up in April at the camp in Singing Hills, and we have one in the fall. So if you want more information, and by the way, when I say family camp, it's entire families, even mother-in-laws and father-in-laws, grandpas are welcome, grandmas. We have unaccompanied minors, and we also have adults who maybe not have any children, but want to come and help out and learn as well. So it's for all these different groups. And we do encourage early registration because there's only so many people that camp will hold. Last year, we actually had to turn away for the first time in our camp's history because we just were full. In the middle of COVID, I think we were the only game in town, only organization that had an event.
Thanks for staying open. You guys.
Oh, yeah. Well, I appreciate Singing Hills, too. But no, and we insisted that if we had to wear masks the whole week, we would not have a camp. And they said, no, you don't have to wear a mask. That's an optional thing. And I don't think a few people came to camp with masks and they took them off pretty quickly. So campconstitution.net, and you have a website that you can see, and you can look at our YouTube videos from last year. You can see all of the classes we've been doing since I think 2010 are on our YouTube channel. So and some of the activities, we actually have martial arts, we have marksmanship. Hopefully we're going to be able to take a field trip to Calvin Coolidge's homestead in nearby Plymouth, Vermont. Nice. If Vermont opens up, probably not by then. Now, they might have 3 cases of COVID in the whole state, so they got to keep it locked down. And we have hiking, and there's swimming. There's a pond. There's a swimming pool, and all kinds of great activities. And it's for all ages. We have a special program for the little ones called Patriot Camp. See, we love our history. And we're not ashamed of our history, and we instill that love.
You're not tearing down statues, right? You don't want to tear down the statues.
No, we're not tearing down statues. No, not at all. Unlike the left.
We're talking with Hal Shurtleff from Camp Constitution. You're going to want to check out that website, campconstitution.net. Hal, I always like to end the show, if I can, on an upbeat note. So what I selected for this week's show is an upbeat country song. So Spencer, hopefully you've got that all queued up. And Hal, I think you're really going to like this one. Go ahead.
Truck Sessions.
What's going on, y'all? In honor of Coca-Cola, I have written a brand new song for you called Be Less White. That's right. The pamphlet that's going around Coca-Cola to all their employees right now, if you hadn't been paying attention, is how to be less white. All the reasons white people are bad. At some point, I'm just like, damn. The hatred is real. Can you imagine if we released a pamphlet called Be Less Black. Can you imagine if Coca-Cola did that? What would happen? Y'all, I'm from Mississippi. I don't care who you are, what walk of life you come from. You come down here and have a beer with me anytime. But this is getting comical. It's getting ridiculous. At a certain point, I think in America, we just need to be less stupid. That's what we need to be. Hope y'all like this song. Be proud of who you are, no matter where you came from. In the meantime, we need to be less white. Coca-Cola's done lost their dadgum minds. Yeah, the white guilt's hitting pretty hard this time. I thought I'd seen it all, but as it turns out, I have to change my skin to live this one down. We gotta be less white, be less white. It's liberals gone wild and they lost their minds. We gotta be less white, be less white. Now I'm switching to Pepsi and it's all alright. They said to be less white is to be less oppressive, be less certain and less defensive, be less arrogant, try to actually listen. Well, Coke ain't getting served in my kitchen. Be less white, hell, be less white. It's liberals gone wild and they lost their minds. We gotta be less white, be less white. Now I'm switching to Pepsi and it's all alright. Well, I got something for your little online training class. Take your little pamphlet and stick it right back up your ass. While I try to be less white, be less white. It's liberals gone wild and they lost their minds. We gotta be less white, be less white. Now I'm switching to Pepsi and it's all alright. God bless y'all. Be sure to subscribe. That might even end up being the new theme song over at Pepsi. I don't think the boys at Coca-Cola are going to like it much, but over at Pepsi, you can have it if you want it. Hey, it's a good thing all that snow thawed out last week. It's getting way too white around here. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. Y'all be good.
All right. So one of the things, Hal, we got, well, just a minute left, but we're with Hal Shurtleff from Camp Constitution. We'll close just with a quick, I'll just make a quick observation about humor. I'm noticing if you're on YouTube, if you're on the internet at all, huge audiences are building behind humorists like this guy. There's a guy named JP who's building a huge audience.
Familiar with him.
Yeah, and there's others, and they're bringing they're using satire from the right, which hasn't been around in my lifetime. It's
the Babylon Bee is another incredible one too.
Babylon Bee, and these outlets, which are all humor, satire, are building immense audiences, very popular, and I think it's just beginning. I think we're seeing a major cultural shift now. We're beginning to see a major cultural shift in a better direction.
I'm trying to get some of these statues that have been taken down in Boston. I'm telling the officials there that we're starting the Orwellian Museum here in Alton, New Hampshire, and I want to put them on my property so they can be appreciated by people who aren't afraid of our history, aren't afraid of being offended by someone they may not like historically.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Don't you, dear viewer and listener, be offended this week. Don't choose to be offended. I'd show you here, let me show, we'll close with this. I'll show you my new mask that I bought. So can you see it? Yeah, here it is. Good morning. This is the mask I wear. Good morning, liberals. What are you offended by today? So I wore that one today. I got a smile at the sandwich shop. So hey, thanks for tuning in to WCN-TV.net. Go to campconstitution.net. Sign up for family camp this summer. And Hal Shurtleff, thanks so much for.
Thank you for having me. God bless you.
All right. God bless you all.